Hello, good morning, everybody. Afternoon or evening, wherever or whenever you're watching this. I'm Marty Cross. This is Cross's Corner. And in the corners today is Jenna Armstrong, Cambridge University Boat Club president. Lovely
Hello.
to see you, Jenna.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's really excited to talk to you because it's a big week coming up. I think probably every week's a big week in terms of training for the boat race because the time is so constrained. But you're going to Trial Eights next week.
Yeah. So we're heading down as a crew or as a whole squad tomorrow morning. So Friday morning or Saturday morning, and then our trial eights is next Wednesday. So we're really we're getting close.
I know you did some pieces this morning. How did it feel loading the boats on the trailer?
It was actually kind of surreal, and I think there was a bit of a buzz around the boathouse this morning as we were loading the trailers, because I think this was, for a lot of the athletes, the first time that this really kind of felt real. This is, because of Forest Head was canceled, this is really going to be our first real performance on the Tideway. And I think, we're all kind of really excited about it.
Yeah, that seems crazy, doesn't it? That I know you obviously raced in the boat race earlier this year, and a lot of the women in the squad raced in the reserve boat race. But it's a long time to be off the Tideway.
Yeah. We've done a couple of camps so far this season. So this will probably be, I think this will be our fourth Tideway appearance this year. So we definitely have done the training and stuff, but to actually go out and lay down a performance, over the whole boat race course, that's something that a lot of the members of the squad haven't done yet. So I think it's an exciting opportunity for all of us.
Yeah. Now you've been out this morning. Can you tell us a little bit about the session you did and where it fits into your program?
Yeah, so this morning, took the 5:57 a.m. train out to Ely, like we always do. And we were in our matched eights. We did some side-by-side pieces with starts. And that was, it was really high intensity. And then, of course, we pulled the boats together, do a couple of swaps, test out different combinations and that sort of thing. So I think that just added another level of intensity and kind of drive to that particular session this morning.
That's really interesting. So I guess Paddy hasn't yet decided what combinations will be give the most even contest quite yet.
Yeah, Paddy does a phenomenal job of getting them right on the day. But of course, he's got to do the best he can to kind of make sure that they are right on the day. So we're still kind of testing out different combinations and just trying to get those speeds as closely matched as possible. So we can have a trial eights that was kind of similar to the one we had last year that was kind of right down to the line.
So what's it like doing starts, just before Christmas?
I love it. This is really kind of the first time that we've explored this part of our race plan all season. So far, it's all been rolling starts. So this is really the first time that we can kind of see what speeds and what power outputs we can get off of a start. And so that's actually been exciting and honestly quite promising with some of the speeds that we're seeing. So it's good.
Yeah. Can you tell us what sort of watts in ballpark average the women are putting down?
I'm not sure, to be honest, in terms of I think that's probably more what Paddy has in front of him. The screens that I have, I can just kind of see what I'm doing. So I think the boxes and the coaches kind of have the full picture. But again, the numbers that we've been seeing overall are kind of promising and kind of on par with what we would expect this time of year.
And what are you going off at now? 40 plus?
Oh, well, so I'm in the stroke seat of one of the crews, surprisingly.
Oh,
this
really?
Year. Yeah. That was,
well
I wasn't expecting one. So if you're in my crew, the 40s, whether or not that is what that will look like on boat race day, I can't say. Last year's blue boat, we didn't go off quite that high. And that worked out just fine for us. So I think it's kind of finding what's best for the crew and kind of, what that particular crew kind of needs. So.
And where do you settle? 30, 33, 34, 32? Where's your...
Depends on, I guess, who you ask. In my ideal world, a 34 would be kind of my ideal. But again, there's got to be 8 other people. There's 8 people in total that are kind of driving that, or 8 other people. So I mean, I really, again, I think it's the rate that's going to work best for the crew that you have. Like, there's no point in going down the course at a 34 if you're more effective at a 32, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose, I would choose 34. But
Well, okay, yeah. High rated woman.
yeah.
That's really interesting, Jenna, that you're in the stroke seat because, of course, you rode 4 earlier this year in the boat race. So, how did Paddy, your coach, break this news to you, and how much of a surprise was it?
He posted the lineups one night, and the next morning I got in the boat and I did it. To be honest, there wasn't much warning, and we didn't exactly have a chat about it beforehand. And I've always told them, and I think most of the athletes feel this way, where the coaches are going to put us in the seats that are kind of right for us. At the time of the season that we're in, right? And so, I trust Paddy wholeheartedly. And so if, he tells me to go in stroke seat, I'll do it. If he tells me to go in bow, I'll do it. So, it's kind of, I think, a little bit of trust, that the coaches know what they're doing. And so they'll make the combinations work.
Have you ever rode stroke before when you were at Duke?
So in undergrad, I did my undergrad at Bates College. And I stroked, I guess,
Bates College, yeah.
2012, no, 2013, NCAA crew.
Yeah.
But that was a very last minute change. That was about 4 days before we flew down
Yeah.
to do the race. So I don't really think I had any time to think much about it. And again, I don't treat it any differently than any other seat. So they just kind of popped me in. I did it, and that was that. So I don't have a ton of experience doing it, but I've done it before.
I was going to ask you actually, because I think I would have a thing about particularly being in stroke of an 8, which I haven't done very much. Oh my God, they put me at stroke. But it sounds like you're just like, this is another day, another job,
Yeah.
nothing special here.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the same as any other, any other seat, right? Whether you're, in 4 seat, I always told myself I was the stroke of the boat because that was the only way for me to get my blade in on time with everyone else. So, in my opinion, I mean, everyone kind of has to take ownership of that rhythm and kind of take ownership of when they're placing the catch and how they're driving and that sort of thing. And so, just because you're the one sitting in front of the line doesn't mean you change anything.
Yeah.
Just kind of,
So I'm intrigued as to where Megan Lee, if she's fit, is rowing.
yeah,
In
she's
in the boat.
stroke seat of the other crew.
Yeah, I kind of thought that. How does that feel to be racing an under 23 world champion lined up in the opposite stroke seat?
That's really fun, to be honest. She's such a spectacular rower and just such a spectacular teammate and a spectacular person. And so it is really fun to, kind of be side by side and we'll come in and we'll talk about the watts that we did and, the rates that we managed to hit and that sort of thing. So I think for me, it's kind of a fun challenge because she is so good that I have something to kind of look up to and try and match what she's doing.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting, your squad. I mean, you've got Megan come in, obviously, from who wasn't there last year, and then is it Annabelle Stevens?
Yeah.
Who also is a bit of a catch.
Yeah. She came over from Brooks this year.
Yeah. So how's Annabelle fitted in?
Oh, she's fabulous as well. And I think, she's similar to Megan, just kind of such a natural leader on the squad. And she just brings an enormous amount of experience and knowledge to the crew. And I think what makes Belle just so special with our group is she's so in tune with kind of, the emotions and kind of the feeling of the squad. And so she's the one who's like leaving little like notes in the locker room for people, like little picking up notes and stuff if someone had a bad day. Like that's what Belle, in addition to all the stuff she brings on the water, I think she brings that time to the squad culture. And I've been phenomenally impressed by her.
That's pretty cool. I wonder if that's what I suppose she must have done that at Brooks and found it
Yeah.
worked.
I've never actually asked her if this is something that she'd started here. I mean, I'm sure because it's come so naturally. I'm sure this is something that she's done elsewhere. But I mean, it truly is phenomenal, and she's very aware when people need that, and she's there to support. So.
Yeah. Now you've got where is Belle rowing then? In which boat is she? Your opponents, or is she behind you?
So as of this morning, she's in the other crew. She was in the bow seat today, but again, all of that, we've got, 5 or 6 more days to
Only the
play.
bow seat.
The bow seat's an important role.
Oh, yeah, okay. Sorry,
I
sorry.
wouldn't, I
I
wouldn't
shouldn't have said
underestimate
that.
that. Um, yeah,
She's qualified for the Princess Royal at Henley and, in the single, and you just think I kind of thought, well, she's gonna be down the stern.
yeah. It's really interesting actually because I think I never really thought much about the seats until I got here. So I felt like in the States, the seats didn't matter. And then I came here and people seem to care a lot more, to be honest. But again, I think a lot of this goes down to like Patty and, he knows who's best for what seat at what point in the season. And so, Belle is a phenomenal technical rower. She's really good on the water. And she kind of brings a lot of that hype and that energy. And so to actually put that in, to have that in bow, um, with Megan and Stern, I think it actually works quite nicely. Again, I'm not in that
Uh,
crew, so I don't know, but
yeah,
I would.
yeah. Well, maybe you hope it doesn't work too well. It's quite interesting your motivation because clearly you want to win the Trial Eights race next Wednesday, but you also want the boat club to do really well as president. Um, which motivation's going to win out?
I mean, to be honest, I think on the day, obviously, I want my crew to end up on, ahead, like anybody does, right? All of us are super competitive, and the moment you put us next to another crew, you want to be in front. But with that being said, I think the lead up into it, the motivation is to get both crews and all of the athletes rowing as well as they possibly can and going as fast as they possibly can.
Yeah,
Because at the end of the day, Trial Eights is just exactly that. It's a trial run. And so, the date that matters is the day of the race. And so we're kind of using this as a training opportunity and as a racing opportunity to kind of prepare us. So and I think most of the squad is kind of bought into that idea of, we're just trying to go as fast as we possibly can. And the day of the race, I think that's when the competitiveness, you'll see that come out. And then the day after, we'll come back together as a squad, and it'll kind of be back to normal.
So who are the two Coxes that you've got? Because last year you had name's just got out of my head.
Yeah, and James.
Trotman, James
Oh,
Trotman.
yeah. Last year we had Sam and Kate. This year we have James and Hannah Murphy, who came to
Yeah.
us from Syracuse University over in the States.
Okay. So who's coxing your boat?
At the moment, James.
Okay.
Yeah, but that again swapped around, gosh, this weekend. So I've actually had the opportunity to row with both Coxes over
Yeah.
the course of this trials period, which I've really enjoyed.
Yeah. And just give me a sense of how long it generally is before there's some sort of settled blue boat emerging after you've done the Christmas break, the training camp, which we can talk about briefly. How long is there before you guys get a sense of who's in the blue boat?
Gosh, I think it changes every year, to be honest, and I think a lot of it just kind of depends on how kind of tightly packed the top end of the crew or top end of the squad is, um, and always, there's kind of fights for the last couple of seats all the way down to nearly the crew announcement. So when it's, I guess, maybe late February, early March, and so I guess really the question is, how many people are kind of in that group that are kind of vying for those last couple of seats? Is it 4 people? Is it 2 people? Is it and I think it's kind of too early to tell with this group,
Mm.
kind of when that's going to start to shake out. Yeah.
Have you got so obviously there's more than 16 female rowers in the CUBC squad. What's happened to the other rowers that started it who haven't made trial eights?
Yeah, so we have obviously our lightweight squad, and then we've got kind of our open weight spares who kind of didn't make that top 16. And what we've done with all of those athletes is we've made 2 matched eights for lightweights and the spares. And so they're actually going to race trial eights. I think their race time's about 20 minutes after ours. So they're going to have the same sort of match crews going down the course. all 16 of them. And that actually is, I think the entire squad will have a trial-aids race in
Oh, that's
some
pretty cool.
capacity. Yeah.
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 So how many? It's interesting because I was looking at the crew biogs, and there were, a reasonable number of women that have rowed in the lightweight races. How many of those sort of former lightweights have made the cut for the trial eights?
So this year we've got Katie Hampson, who was in the lightweight squad last year, who's now trialing as an open weight, and then Freya Sutcliffe, who was in the 2022 lightweight crew, who's taken a year out, and then she's now come back as an open weight rower. So we've got two athletes that are making that transition, similar to what Rosa did last year.
Yeah, Rosie Millard, was that?
Yeah, Rosa Millard. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we talked when it was the challenge. In fact, let me ask you about that. How was the whole challenge thing for you, where you met your opposing president, Ella Stadler from OUBC? How was that?
Yeah, I loved it. It was a really kind of fun experience, and I think what made it so exciting for me was just kind of the historic nature behind it. Like, I loved the fact that, this has clearly been going on for, a very long time, and the fact that I got to be part of that little bit of rowing history, I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah. And had you met Ella before? Or was that the first time you'd said hi?
Yeah, so we had raced against each other last year. And then there is a trip to Croatia kind of every year, probably mid to late May. And so all 4 blue boats will go to that. And I really enjoy that trip because it is an opportunity to get to know the Oxford women in a non kind of competitive setting. So, you start to realize that they are exactly just like us. They have very similar academic experiences and backgrounds. And, the boat race campaign is such a unique experience. And, all 16 of us, women on that crew or on that trip had, very similar experiences. So I met Ella during that trip, and obviously spoke with her a little bit while we were there.
Oh, that's really good to know, actually. Yeah, that you do kind of get the chance to hang out and do that kind of stuff. What's this? I think they've got a lot more returning blues from that boat that you raced earlier this year than you have. You've got 3. I think it's yourself, Karina,
And James.
James. Yeah. Does that put you in a more challenging position?
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, we've got a lot of Blondie returners. And one of the things that I love about this program, and I think Patty does a really good job of, and Autumn, and I guess now Matilda, is that they really set Blondie up for success. So kind of going to the season, Blondie was so developed last year under Patty, and particularly under Autumn, that they kind of came in ready to make that step up. And I think by only having 3 returning blues, that group saw an opportunity, and my God, did they seize it over the summer. Like, those girls were absolutely busting their butts to try and make sure that, they would just kind of slot right in. And so, I mean, yeah, they're ready, and the numbers that they're producing in the gym and the numbers that they're producing out on the water, I'm really excited to kind of see their progression even over the course of the season. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good to know about the numbers. I mean, I'm not expecting you to tell us, 5K scores in terms of, I guess, does Paddy use that as a test?
Yeah, so we do a little bit of, ergo testing like we all do, like every program will. The 2K and the 5K are kind of the big ones that we benchmark ourselves against. And those are, the record boards up on the wall are all 2Ks and 5Ks. So,
yeah. And how have the numbers been compared to, I don't know, last year? I can't imagine they're the same as the 22 crew with all those stellar internationals in the boat.
Yeah, the 22 crew was definitely, I think that was an unusual year, even for us, post-Olympic year. That was even exceptional, just, even looking at the standard of a normal post-Olympic year. But yeah, for kind of a normal, typical year, oh yeah, we're kind of right on target where again, I would expect us to be at this time of season.
Yeah, were you around? You were around in the squad in that in 22, weren't you?
I was, yeah. I ended up rowing 2-seat up Blondie that year, and again, I think that kind of that was one of the most insane seasons I've ever been a part of. Just kind of having those talented rowers kind of around us every day, rowing with them, interacting with them, learning from them. I mean, that was incredible.
Yeah, I've just remembered who's doing the commentary for the Cambridge Trial-8, and it's Imogen Grant.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah, so she, I think she's looking for, when she retires from rowing in the 2030s or 40s, whenever that is, she's looking for a career as a rowing commentator, which she'll be fantastic at.
Yeah.
How much of you had to do with any of those former internationals like Imogen or Grace Prendergast this year?
So Grace is actually coming to talk to the squad while we're down in London. And this is kind of she came last year as well. And so we're kind of hoping to make this an annual thing, just to kind of share her story and her journey. Normally Ruby too comes with her, but we couldn't get a date that everybody worked. So I think Grace is coming now, and hopefully we can get Ruby to come and talk to us at a different date. So yeah, Grace will still be kind of involved. And then Imogen, I believe, has spoken to the lightweight squad a few times, kind of about their kind of experience and journey that's kind of unique to being a lightweight rower. And then, of course, occasionally, I guess last year, Grace did sub into our boat for a training session. We had Jess Eddy who subbed in. So
Yeah.
we kind of have those Cambridge connections, and some of those former internationals will kind of come in, and they're really high impact sessions, I think, for all of us. It's amazing how much you can learn just from one session with somebody like that in the boat with you.
Did she Jess Eddy race in the Brooks fixture?
She did, yeah. I was in 4-seat and she was in 3-seat, and that was probably one of the coolest races I've been a part of. It was just so fun. She just brought this kind of energy that we hadn't had in that boat at that point. And that was just an absolute blast.
Yeah. So we talked a bit about Paddy, but maybe not, in terms of specifics. He's obviously, I mean, the Cambridge, is it 6 wins now on the trot?
I think so, from 2017 on. So 17, 18, 19, 20 was canceled, 21, 22. Right?
And 23.
And 23. Yeah, 23 has already happened. Yeah, so that's 6. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's some record for a coach.
Yeah.
So let's try and unpick what is it that makes him as successful a coach, as effective a coach.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is experience, and I think every year he does this, he gets even better at it. He's also very willing to learn. So I think every year he's, kind of developing his craft even more. And so we'll have guest coaches come in, or even the season with Grace Prendergast kind of coming in, like, he's humble enough to, pick up tips and tricks and little things from all of these kind of guest coaches and other people and experts in their field, to kind of integrate that into our kind of program. So yeah. I think, yeah.
So tell us about, rowing and the stroke profile. Like, how does he work on the front end? What does he want off the back ends?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's surprisingly simple. If you think about it, we make it complicated, but I think, his idea is, let's kind of keep it simple, right? So a long kind of leg driven stroke. And then once you've kind of picked up the boat and you've accelerated it the whole length of your stroke, then just kind of let the boat run, and let the boat kind of do the work on the recovery. And so I think those are the two components. And then it's really about, how do you maximize that acceleration? And then how do you not mess it up, basically, in the recovery, and kind of surprisingly getting 8 people to do all of that together is where I think it becomes a little bit more difficult.
And what about any sort of pause around the finish or that kind of stuff? Do you ever work on that?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a pause, but more of a, kind of, a slower kind of extraction, kind of slow hands away. And then once the hands are away, then, rock the body over and go. So the hands actually never stop, but they do kind of go slower than I think some of the other crews you might see. And it was actually, I think it's something we'd been doing for a while, but I think that was something that Grace Prendergast really was phenomenal at. And so I think she really kind of helped us develop that so we could let the boat run a little bit more once we've accelerated it.
Mm. And what is it you're working on at the moment? What's your issues technically that you'd like to smooth out?
So I've been kind of working on actually getting the body position, so getting kind of my hips and my trunk
Ah,
over, and then actually holding that position into and out of the catch. So I have a tendency to kind of break my back a little bit. So kind of or tucking my bum under or something like that. So just kind of keeping everything nice and stable into and out of the catch, no extra
yeah,
movements, and
yeah,
simple.
yeah, yeah.
It's about really, for me at least, simplifying the movements. So it's a little bit more predictable for everybody else behind me.
Yeah. As president of the squad, you've got quite a responsibility in terms of how the squad and then the crews bond together. Maybe you could talk a bit about last year's blue boat, or maybe your plans for this year. What do you do? How do you get these women to bond together as a group?
Yeah. So I think for me, actually, I kind of let them lead that. And so, it's something where I always kind of facilitate it, but I think at the end of the day, like the squad kind of leads that, and it is quite organic. So we'll do a couple of like team building sessions and that sort of thing together. But in terms of like the actual like developing the social side of things, like we have social secretaries who've been kind of elected to kind of make sure that things are organized and that there are events that are going on for the squad to kind of bond outside of like crew hours and that sort of thing. We are quite intentional to kind of put those things after big challenges like seat racing or trialates. We'll have like a nice dinner after. We'll do our trialates, we'll do our 5K, and then we'll have this kind of dinner with the whole squad to bring people together. And so I think, a lot of this is kind of organically run by the athletes themselves. And then for me, it's just kind of making sure that, things are kind of ticking over. If there are any problems and stuff, to make sure that I can kind of intervene a little bit earlier. But to be honest, most of them have kind of come up with the ideas themselves, and I'm just kind of the one to make it
Yeah,
happen, if that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. Are there any
Yeah.
bakers in your crew that bring down
Oh my goodness.
treats and things
Karina
like
is
that?
one. She
Is
was
she?
last year as well. Yeah, she's always, I think that's kind of, especially when she's stressed, that's how she manages her stress, is to bake stuff. So she'll always come in with some sort of baked good. Um, Gosh, all the time, to be honest. She's probably the one that comes to mind. I'm sure there are a few others, but she's definitely one.
Yeah. Now, let's have a look at that race last year. We talked about this at the challenge. I remember. I thought you described it beautifully. Um, and they showed the clip of that moment close to Hammersmith Bridge. Maybe you could describe what went on there and what it was like from your seat in the boat.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's something that we had kind of practiced in training. It's something that we knew could have happened, and was very likely to kind of happen. And so we had discussions about it. We'd practice what we would do in that situation. And I think, I was in four seat, so um, I don't have very much control from four seat in terms of what the steering is doing, what the opposition is doing. Like, there's so much that I can't control, but the one thing that I can control is my power output and my blade work. And I trust James and I trust Quiva to kind of make, be the brains behind this whole operation and to make the right decision at the right time. So James called, a push at that moment. And so again, I went back to the things that I knew I can control and the things that I was good at, which was to put my blade in and push. And so
Mm,
that's what I did. And there was no point in that moment worrying about, I mean, worrying about the what ifs or worrying about, what if there was a blade clash or what if they'd made contact or anything like that. My primary focus was to just get away from them, and trust that Quiva and James would make the right calls from a steering perspective to make sure that, we got clear.
Because I guess for a moment, so watching from outside, it did seem as though you were the faster crew, you were ahead, but James's steering had put you in a position of jeopardy, which Oxford then looked to take advantage of. So I think Tara Slade called a big push,
Mhm.
and they nearly came up to you. I mean, I wonder, looking back in terms of hindsight, what you think of James's call in terms of the steering, and yeah, how it seems, a few months after the event.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in the moment, I don't know where I'm meant, where we're meant to be, where we are in relationship to the stream and stuff. Because I've never had to steer the tideway. But I think looking back at the stream or looking back at the video, I actually don't think James was that far off of where he was meant to be at all.
Mm.
And so we did talk about, if we were ahead, and they could kind of force some sort of blade clash or some sort of, interference. That may be a strategy that the opposition might be using. So something we talked about, but again, looking back at the video, I actually don't think he was in the wrong place. And
So
again, I'm not the
Matt Smith was being a bit harsh in that respect.
Possibly. And again, I'm not the expert because I have never steered the tideway, nor do I really want to steer the tideway at this time. But yeah, I mean, looking how close we were to the buttress, I don't think we could have moved over much further without being in the buttress of the bridge.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, and I remember thinking like we are quite close to this buttress here. So yeah, because my blade was out on that side. But so I don't think we could have moved over much further without having the interference of, the buttress. But again, that's, James knows the tideway like the back of his hand. And so I kind of trust that he was in the right spot. But I'm not sure.
So what's it like rowing down? You've gone through Hammersmith and past St Paul's. You've got a good lead on the crew. I mean, I guess from from me watching, and obviously it's easier watching. You think, oh, that's the race over now. How is it in the boat?
I mean, you still got to finish the race. And the kind of cruel thing about the tideway is that anything could happen. And you never really know, so I mean, I think at that point it was, for me at least, like, keep pushing and just keep making the distance between us and them bigger. And James actually was pretty instrumental in that for me, in that, he was like, let's go for the record here. Like, let's make the biggest margin that we possibly can. Like, let's beat the margin that the 2022 crew had laid down. And so I think for me at that point, he made that call and I was like, yeah, all right, like let's do that, right? Like, let's make the margin as convincing as we can. Like, let's convince the world that we are faster and we are much faster.
So when did you realize we're going to win the boat race?
I think coming under Barnes, I was like, I think that was the moment where I was like, this is my boat race. It's looking pretty good for me. And, this is something that I had dreamed about and worked for years and years. And so I think coming under Barnes, James made another call and I forgot what it was now, but I think that kind of took me into that moment of like, wow, this is it. And this is cool. And I'm exactly where I want to be in that moment. So I think that's when I kind of knew it was looking like it was going our way. And then, it's not over until you cross the line. And I think that's when I finally relaxed a little bit. And yeah, just kind of.
Did you know before the race that you were going to be next year's president?
No, those elections
really?
happen in May, I think, early June.
So why would you stand for that? What on earth induced you to stand for that job?
I mean, to be honest, I love it. And I think for me, my favorite part about rowing is building a crew and building a team. And the fact that, you can take 9 individuals that are, can be vastly different depending on the year, get them to row together, get them to work together, get them to live in one tiny house together without any major issues, for a week and a half for the boat race. And I love that. Like that's the part that makes rowing so special for me, are the people. And so when the opportunity kind of presented itself, to run for president, I said, well, if that's the bit that I love about rowing the most,
Yeah.
now I get to be in a position where I get to do that every day. And yeah.
That's a remarkably positive outlook on that. Did someone ask you, or did you go, "Hey, I want that"?
It's something that I had wanted, and kind of thought about. And I had run the prior year against Quiva, so it's
I
something that
didn't
like,
know that.
yeah. So it's something that I had wanted, to do, and so I'm glad this year that I have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. How long have you got to go at Cambridge?
Um, I am in kind of my final. I'm in my final year. Um, we're still I'm working with my supervisor in terms of like when extensions and stuff, what I'm eligible for. If that makes sense. I was hit with COVID pretty hard my first like year and a half. And my PhD is all lab based. So to not be able to go in to work
Yeah.
50% of the time because of COVID and stuff. So the short answer is it's kind of complicated in terms of like when I'm actually finished. Um, but yeah, making progress on it, and hopefully within the next year or so I should be wrapping up. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what about you and rowing in the future? Because I know you've had breaks before in
Mhm.
your rowing career.
Yeah. So I am going to go back to the US when I'm done with my PhD. And I've actually trained as a medical doctor there. So I'm going to go back to medical school and go into clinical practice, which is quite difficult with balancing kind of a full-time rowing schedule like this and medicine. And that's kind of why I took a gap in my rowing career to begin with, was to kind of do this medical degree. So I think in an ideal world, it would be something where I'd really love to kind of continue to row more recreationally. I don't think I'll ever be able to sustain this whole, twice a day, every day type of schedule. But I would love to kind of continue rowing kind of for the rest of my life because I do really enjoy it. Um,
Yeah, that's really. I mean, I guess your path into the sport is quite interesting, and I know you've told this story um, quite a few times. But it's interesting because to me, you're quite a tall woman, and you were into skiing, and I guess how many tall women are top alpine skiers? I'm guessing. I'm
um,
wondering.
I think you don't necessarily see alpine skiing like with the same sort of like size skew the way that you do with rowing. So with alpine skiing, there were women of all shapes and sizes. There were women who were kind of my height. There were women that are a little bit shorter. It's I think it's a little bit more heterogeneous in terms of the
Yeah.
population that you'll see. But my
How
parents
good?
like they love the sport, and so that was like
Mm,
kind of how I got into it. And so yeah.
how good were you as a skier?
Um, I mean, gosh, I mean that's a tricky one. Like, I mean, I traveled quite some distances. I mean, I represented like the state of New York and stuff like that, and kind of, um, you know, Eastern regional races and that sort of thing. So something where I'd wanted to race Division One in university. But I mean, that obviously didn't work out, and I got into
Yeah.
rowing. So I mean,
So
yeah.
how fast are you going, or how fast were you going? Do you know what sort of speed were you going when you were like flat out down a slope?
Um, maybe like 60 miles an hour would be like
That's
kind of the
crazy.
max. Depending on the event and depending on what I would do. So it kind of depend on the which discipline you were in and that sort of thing. But
So
yeah.
so there's a huge adrenaline rush in that sport, and I'm wondering how that compares or is different to rowing.
Yeah, I definitely they're different. But I will say it's a similar feeling as like when you finish a really hard erg, once you've caught your breath, and you're like, wow, like that was really cool. And I just PB'd and like you're ready to jump
Yeah.
off, you're so excited. It's a similar kind of feeling. And I would imagine the hormones are probably pretty similar in terms of like what's flooding through your body at that point. I just think it's the level of exhaustion that kind of hits after with rowing that's a little bit different than what would hit with skiing. But it's a very similar feeling, to be honest.
Yeah.
In terms of, yeah.
So I'm guessing you had a fall at some stage.
Yeah. I had my first ACL I tore when I was, 14 maybe. Um,
Wow.
and so, yeah, that was, a crash and just kind of, I mean, once the joint becomes unstable, the crashes kind of keep happening because the joint is unstable.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, so I trained on it for about a year before I got surgery on it. They fixed it the first time, and the damage was so severe that they couldn't get the whole thing. So I had to go back like a year and a half later for a second revisionary surgery. And
How
then
does a 14 or 15-year-old girl cope with that going on for them?
it wasn't easy. I think with skiing, because there are so many ACL tears, I wasn't the only one. So there was kind of a small group of women or girls at that age where we kind of were going through this at different stages at some point. And so, but it was difficult. But I think I learned a lot from it. And
What like?
I mean, it's just like the dedication to the recovery and the rehab and the physio and that sort of thing. Like the number of people that, the physio tells you to do something, these exercises 3 times a day, every day, and most people don't do it. But when you're trying to recover from something that significant and kind of come back to elite sport like that, you have to, and you have to prioritize that. And you have to prioritize, the fact that you're sleeping and you're icing and you're doing all of the right things to kind of optimize recovery. And I think I've learned from that. I even bring that into my rowing now where, I'm just, I think a lot more aware of my body. And, I'm a lot more careful in terms of when somebody tells me to do something, I'll do it,
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then there's a story about someone spotting that you've got very long legs. Kind of like rowing programs tend to do this. They kind of stalk tall people and say, "Have you ever thought about rowing?" I mean, was it like that for your introduction to the sport?
Oh yeah, that's exactly how it went. This girl in my undergrad class, her name was Hannah Weiss. She walked up to me and she said, "Hey, the rowing team, like we didn't get as many recruits as we wanted. We need a couple more girls. You're really tall. Like, what sport do you play?" And I was like, "Well, I went to the whole story with the skiing thing." So she was like, "Well, you're not committed to any sport." And I was like, "No." And she was like, "Excellent. Why don't you come down?" And so I met the coach. We did like a welcome back barbecue. I was like, and I'd never been in a room of like women that were that tall, that strong. They were all like this, and that were just like eating volumes of food. And up until that point in my life, I had never been around women who were eating as much as I was. Like I felt a bit uncomfortable in my own skin up until that point, that very moment where I was like, I eat like a teenage boy. I am the size of a teenage boy. My muscles are bigger than most of the teenage boys, my age. And I'd never been in a group of women like that. And I was like, I want to be here all the time. So I told the coach, I was like, yeah, like I'm in, this is really cool. I think they made me do a 5K test.
No.
Like a week later. And
How was that?
looking back on it, the score wasn't great in hindsight, but at the time I managed to beat a couple of the recruits. And I think it was just like sheer, like I was terrified of them telling me that I wasn't fast enough and I couldn't hang out with all these cool friends that I'd just made. And so I was terrified. And so I was like, well, if I just go faster than the girl that's next to me, then they can't cut me. And then they'll let
Yeah.
me stay. Little did I know they were going to let me stay regardless. But I didn't know that. And so I remember I was knackered. Like I finished that 5K and I thought I was going to die. And that was that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think the height of your achievement was winning for your college the NCAA's.
Mhm.
So how big a deal is that?
Oh, that was an incredible moment, to be honest. It's something that our college had come in second, I think, at that point for like 5 years in a row.
Mm.
So every year, we were just going in being like, you just want that win so bad. Like we'd always kind of been second fiddle to somebody else. And so that was like when our class had arrived, there was this legacy of second place, and we were like, we want to do more than this. We want to finally win. So we had, I think, the season of our lives at that point. And things were kind of looking like we were in a good
Mm.
position. And then on the day of the race, our 1V, so our first boat, the boat I was in, just couldn't pull it off. We came in second, I think. So we were like, okay, like we're kind of bummed. We were like, oh, second.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and it turns out, we didn't know at the time, but our second varsity 8, which kind of went down the course before us, you don't know the results of their race before you
yeah,
go. They had won. And we didn't know that. And so, we were kind of bummed. We were like, it's all right. We gave it our best shot, blah, blah, blah. And as we're kind of rowing back up, they had like lost their minds on the side of the stands there, the second crew. And we were like, what are they on about? And so the news kind of got to us, and they actually caught it on film, the moment that we went from what we thought had been, another second place, which is still respectable, to
yeah.
winning. And it was incredible. And that it was a goal that we'd been working for 4 years. And so to finally be able to achieve that was, it was incredible.
So what I'm trying to understand is, I think you had potentially in your back pocket an offer of a place at Cambridge or an approach,
Yeah.
and you've just won this race, at the NCAA's, and then you go and spend 5 years out of the sport.
Yeah.
I kind of think, that's a really interesting mindset that follows that path and that profile.
Yeah. Patty did reach out to me actually right after that win. And, at the time, like I wanted to go to medical school. I knew I wanted to become a doctor. And, that was kind of the journey that I knew I wanted to kind of go on. And so, I said, well, I've had my fun in the sport. Like there's no way it could get better than this.
Yeah.
And I've got this really long career ahead of me. And so, I, at the time, was kind of like, well, I'll just pursue this career. And I'll kind of keep this idea of Cambridge kind of in my back pocket. If either the medicine doesn't work out, or, or in this case, if I want to kind of do a PhD in the middle of the medical degree. So I kind of like always had in the back of my mind. And I think after I told Patty, like, thanks, but no thanks, I'll be in touch. I think about a couple months later, I was like, oh, I really should have done that. I really should have done that. That was a missed opportunity that I wish I could get back, and I don't. So I then spent the next like 5 years, of course, doing the medicine degree, but again, in the back of my mind being like, how can I get myself back to Cambridge, or get myself to Cambridge to kind of do this race?
Yeah. Did you swap stories with Imogen Grant? Because she seems to be this, incredible obsessive character who pursued her studies as a doctor, and then trains through that and raced through that. So I guess it's theoretically possible to do that.
Yeah. I mean, Imogen and we obviously rode together in the 2022 campaign. So I know her well. Yeah, I mean, a little bit. Like our stories are kind of different. Obviously the medical training programs are different in the States versus here, and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think her story is quite inspiring, and there are definitely a few in the States with like kind of similar backgrounds where they've kind of done the medicine route, have done the rowing route, to kind of manage to do both. It's hard though. It takes a really kind of special person, I think, to be able to pursue both at the same time.
Yeah, I can see that. So coming forward to you as president this year, I'm thinking that it must be pretty good to have a president who's experienced rowing in Blondie, and doing well in that race, and then rowing in the blue boat. I guess you can then relate to a lot of the women in the squad in terms of your own practical experiences.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that was probably one of the strengths in kind of when I ran for president, was, the fact that I kind of had both experiences under my belt. The Blondie race is an amazing experience, but it is very, very different from the blue boat experience. And so, yeah, kind of having the knowledge of what it is like to be Blondie kind of on the ground, I think is really helpful. And I think just brings another awareness of like what the experience is like when you're not in the blue boat, because it is, it's a very different experience leading up to the race and even the race itself.
Yeah. The Blondie crew won last year, but there was quite a serious clash. Is that right?
Yeah, right off the start.
What
That
happened
was just,
there?
yeah, I was actually surprised that they didn't end up restarting it. To be honest, like looking at the footage, back, I'm actually quite surprised. Um, but yeah, I mean,
Whose
all
fault was it?
oh gosh. Um, to be honest, I'm not sure. Like I trust that Kate was in the right position, because I trust Kate and I know Kate and kind of she's one of our own. But again, I don't steer the tideway, so I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, it was actually amazing that both crews managed to get themselves out of that clash without any major, crabs or lost blades or broken equipment or anything like that. I mean, that was substantial.
How much do you train for clashes or like practice that at Ely? Or is it just like maybe something will happen in trial eights and you'll just pick up a few tips about how to row through a clashing blade segment of the race?
We definitely train it. I
Ah,
think, I guess the closer to the race we get, I think the more we practice it. And I also think, the amount that we practice it, I think is dependent on the crew itself. So in a year like this, where we have a lot of returners, a lot of people have practiced it a lot of times, we might do a little bit less. In a year where we have an entirely new squad, we might do a little bit more. But yeah, we always prepare for it, because I think there's so many things that can happen in a boat race in terms of like the what ifs, but like a blade clash is probably one of the most common ones that will happen. And
mm.
so we have to be prepared, because it's an opportunity to kind of get yourself ahead. If you handle it well, you can gain quite a few seats from the clash. If you don't handle it well, you've lost a couple of seats there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the things I think that Jurgen Grobler, who used to coach the British squad to quite a few gold medals, was, famous for, was coming back the next season or the next Olympiad and saying the training program's got to get harder. Um, and I'm just wondering, is there any sense that happens? That the sessions get harder, or is there just a limit to what students can do, and therefore sessions are pretty similar from one season to the next?
I mean, I wouldn't say that there's a limit to what we can do. I think, that bar is kind of always moving, and I think we're always kind of surprising ourselves in terms of like what we're achieving. But what I do think the coaches do adjust for is like what the squad looks like in a given year. So, you know, what is kind of the level of the squad, what are the backgrounds of the squad, what can the squad handle? Because obviously you have to kind of play around with, it'd be nice if we can infinitely increase the volume, but you've got to manage the injuries and the overuse and that sort of thing that comes along with it. So I mean, I think the coaches are kind of titrating that based off the squad that they have in front of them and the
Mm.
needs of that squad. So I think every year it looks a little bit different, but I think the general blueprint looks the same, and then we can kind of change things based off of what we need.
How individualized? Oh, no, I'll ask you this question. I was talking to Simon van Dorp, who's in the Dutch team. He was in the single scull at the World Championships, and they have this type of program where they train at very low intensity for very long distances.
Mhm.
So they're not supposed to go above a particular pulse rate. So that kind of means in their sort of steady state sessions, they can't really race each other except by doing technical things. How is it for you guys? Do you have competitive UT2 sessions where you push your
Um,
pulse rate up? Are you given set pulse rates to train at?
so we have, we do have sessions that are obviously labeled, more UT2 or more AT or, those sorts of things. What we've been doing a lot more of is actually using our physiology testing on the erg to kind of determine power output. So rather than using heart rate, we'll kind of do it based off of
Ah,
power output. And the advantage of that is that, you know, your heart rate can be very variable depending on what your recoveries look like. What phase of the menstrual cycle you're in can really affect that.
yeah.
And so by training strictly off of heart rate, it is a really good tool because it's cheap and it's effective and that sort of thing. But you know, there is some kind of variability there where if you're just looking at power output, that's usually what we use. And so that's individualized per athlete. You know exactly on the ergo what you're meant to be kind of hitting. And so you can just kind of do that.
How does that work in terms of, each woman's cycle in terms of training through that? And, when you're not feeling great and you've got a tough session, how
Mhm.
does that work?
This is where I think Patty's been phenomenal in terms of bringing in experts to kind of help us parse that apart. So we've had at least one session this year, and I think we had a couple last year in terms of like how to manage it, because at the end of the day of the boat race doesn't change. So we've got to kind of manage our menstrual cycles around that day. And so we had a lot of conversations about kind of nutrition and recovery and like the things that we can control to really make sure that we're optimizing our performance every single day, depending on, regardless of where we are kind of within that cycle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That must be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, you're specialising in research on placenta. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I see something about Bolivia somewhere in your research?
Yeah. So I am looking at placental metabolism and kind of and how certain environmental and genetic factors can kind of alter that. With the idea that if you change what the placenta is doing, it obviously changes kind of what the baby can do. Um, so one of the key things that I look at is altitude, and so kind of how altitude can change the placental metabolism. So I've got cohorts of women from all over the world living at different altitudes, and so one of those cohorts, and in fact the highest altitude that we have, is a group of women in La Paz, Bolivia.
Yeah.
So they've donated their placentas for our research, and yeah, so I do have a group of women there.
How does that happen? You actually get placentas flown back from Bolivia to Cambridge?
Yeah, so it's a pretty well-established collaboration. So we have a couple people on the ground that kind of live and work in Bolivia, and they can send the patients and collect the placentas for us. They're able to cryopreserve them, so freeze them down, and then yeah, they get shipped here, and we can analyze them here. So it kind of saves me having to go there to do all of my experiments. I'm able to kind of do everything right here in
Yeah,
Cambridge.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, let's just turn to you've got trial eights coming up, and then it's interesting you threw in a 5K test, which I thought, wow, that's kind of quite tough. I'd have thought the trial eights would be that. So you've got the 5K test, then there's a bit of a break, which I
Mhm.
gather you're going to take a bit of a break, a holiday.
Yeah.
Um, then just talk us through the run into the boat race.
Yeah, so after the Christmas holiday, which we're still training, we're just training basically from wherever we want. Um, we'll then do a 10-day camp in Italy in Sabaudia. And then after that, we'll come back to Cambridge and we're kind of in our normal training schedule. We'll have a couple of fixtures on the
Do you know
weekends.
who you're racing yet?
Not yet. I don't think the list has been published. I mean, there's pretty consistent, like consistently every year we tend to see, Brooks and Leander
Mm,
and Thames Rowing Club. But the formal list kind of, I don't think is published or finalized yet. So
mhm,
we'll have a couple of fixtures. Depending on the year, we might do women's head of the river or not. It just kind of depends on the year and what the crew at that point, the
mm.
blue boat would need. And then we'll move down for race week, which is about 10 days on the tideway. And then we'll have our race.
Wow. Um, Now, one of the things around trial eights is they always seem to have interesting or funny or odd names. So, what's the deal for this year for the Cambridge Eights?
So we've decided to choose four names. So we've got our two open weight crews that are racing each other. And then we've got our lightweight and spares kind of composite crews that are racing each other. So we've gone we've gone for a theme of 4 names to kind of encompass all of the women on our squad, not just, you know, the open women. So we've gone for the 4 lions and the Lion King.
Oh, right. So
So
talk us through those names.
yeah, so it's Mufasa and Sarabi, and then Simba and Nala. And we haven't
Yeah.
quite decided which crew is which one yet. We're in the process of drawing straws for that. But the reason that we've chosen that is that Cambridge University's kind of is represented by the lion. And lions are kind of super cool in that they are the only cats that are social, and they rely on one another for basically every aspect of their kind of survival. And I think most importantly, lions, the prides are actually led by women. And so I really think it encompasses kind of the leadership qualities that we all are kind of possessing within this particular squad. There is no one leader this year. Everyone is kind of leading from their own seats in their own spot. And so we thought that the name was kind of like fun and playful, but also kind of really hones down into like what is important to us. And it's the fact that, you know, we do all really work together, and we all are kind of leaders, both on the water and off the water.
I love that. That's fantastic. If you could have one name that was picked for your crew, which name would it be?
Oh goodness. See, I think I would choose one of the 2 female ones.
Yeah.
I like Nala, but I think that's a popular one, so I may be overruled by one of the other crews. But you know, again, I'm happy with any of them. And you know, like I said, we're gonna, I think, draw some straws later and try and
Yeah.
figure out who gets one.
Any word on what the guys have done? Have they gone for sort of more guy-like names, or what's their tactic been for naming the crews?
To be honest, I don't think they have names yet. We did offer if we wanted to do all 8 as like a one club, like make an all 8 themed thing.
Yeah.
But the issue with that is we just couldn't come to a consensus of which 8, like what those themes might be.
Yeah.
So I think the lightweight men have chosen, gosh, Bates and something else is like a, it's their 50th anniversary of the lightweight race. So I think they have some sort of theme around that. In terms of the open weight men, to my knowledge, I haven't heard anything.
Yeah. Jenna, it's been delightful talking to you. I know you are extremely busy. I guess you've got some more research to do today, or not?
Yeah, I'll head back into the office and get a little bit of work done before our afternoon session.
You are a star, Jenna. Jenna Armstrong, it's been fantastic talking to you. We'll end the live part of this interview now.
All right. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.